Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. Let's get started with our hosts, Linda McKissick and Dana Gentry.
Hi, welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. I'm Linda McKissick.
And I'm Dana Gentry.
Hey, Dana. I can't remember when I talked to you last, but it feels like a while. What's going on with you? What's new?
You made it to Ohio, though, since I talked to you last.
Yes, I've been to Missouri. I've been to Ohio. And funny story, also I've been to California. And somewhere along the way, I think California, we bought cheese because our friends Raymond and Terry were going to come over and they love like cheese and wine. Well, Raymond gets sick, so they don't come. So we've got all this cheese. And so I pack this cheese up, take it to Texas. And then we're only in Texas for almost less than a week. So I'm like, well, I got to take the cheese. So I load the cheese to Branson, and I'm bringing it to Ohio.
How much cheese did you get?
What's bad is we already had cheese we weren't going to eat, and we go to somewhere along the way, we go to Whole Foods, and Jimmy decides, oh, they've got Port Select. That's my favorite cheese. He adds more to the cheese. So by the time I get to Missouri, my suitcase is over, and it's all cheese. I said, somebody's eating cheese this week because either that or I'm just going to give in and throw it away. I'm just not going to haul that cheese anymore. So I've been to 3 states, and the cheese has been with me in all 3 states. It's nuts. It's one of those things that you do and you think, why did I do that? Just throw the cheese away or give it to somebody. I don't know. I could have given it to somebody somewhere.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy. Well, I haven't flown. I meant to ask you this last time. We kind of talked about it, but this has been the longest I've ever been without flying. Are the airports, is it back to normal or what?
No, it's very, very, nothing's hardly open. You can't even you have to walk forever to find a cup of coffee. That's the downside of everything. All the stores aren't open. And there's people, some of the planes are a little more packed than others, but mostly they're allowing you to sit, and if you're not together with someone, not to sit someone next to you, which is kind of nice.
Okay.
You have to wear those stupid masks all the time.
I was going to say, do you have to wear it the whole time you're on the plane?
Yeah, unless you're taking a drink, and they don't serve you anything. So unless you bring a drink on and you're drinking it, then you can take it off temporarily.
Wow.
But I have to tell you, I'm really struggling with the masks. They're hot. You can't breathe.
I feel like I can't catch my breath in one.
And you can't understand anybody. It's just not fun. But anyway, so much for all that. But
so even in first, they don't serve you drinks or anything? Wow.
And on the way to California, they did. I think if it's over 3 hours, I think they kind of have to.
Right.
But under 3 hours, no.
Crazy.
Better get it before you get there.
Phew.
Anyway, so just to recap, you and I are on a series talking about what I kind of consider a formula that if I was going to be challenged to grow anything, this is a formula I've used all my life with great success. No matter where I was going or what I was challenged to grow with, this would be the formula that I would use. And so in previous weeks, so if you haven't heard the previous sessions, then you can go back and listen to those. But the formula is R, and R stands for relationships, plus V, and that V stands for validity, and then plus another V, and that V stands for value gap. And value gap is what we're going to talk about today. And then there's a line under all of those, if you can think of your old algebra formulas, and there's a letter T at the bottom. And that just means even with this formula, you have to give it time. You have to give it its due process to work. Because when you start dealing with people, you don't get to dictate the time, whether you're selling them on your service as a realtor, whether you're recruiting them to your company, no matter what you're doing, you really have to let that person be in charge of how long that's going to take, that process is going to take. So we talked about before relationships, the importance of picking the people that you want to be a hero to. Who would you most enjoy if you're selling real estate? Who would you most enjoy helping to do that? And then we also said that with the first V, if you don't have validity, someone's not going to allow you to build that relationship deep. And so part of our challenge whenever we're trying to get in a relationship with whomever, we have to create the validity. We either have to find out what validity is needed or what validity do we actually already have, and who would that open the door to a relationship with? That's one good way to do it, is with the validity I already have, who would be the people that I could probably step into a relationship with and they would be open because I would be valid to them.
Yep.
That's a great way to look at it. And then the value gap is until you help someone fill a value gap that they have, until you get them to self-discover that whatever you're selling or wherever you're trying to recruit them to, that decision is going to help them fill that value gap until they self-discover. And I always like to say, we're not good enough to make a seller sell, a buyer buy, or an agent join. You're just not. But you can help people self-discover, because nobody does what you tell them. They only do what you self-discover. So our job really is to get people to self-discover that wherever you are, whatever you're selling, really will fill whatever their value gaps are. And my favorite saying to really understand why value gaps are important and why filling them is important is Zig Ziglar's old saying that the way you get out of life what you want is to just help enough other people get what it is they want. And the key words there is what they want, not what we assume they want, not what we think they want, not what we want and think they should want it too, but truly getting to know the person well enough, whether it's a client, a customer, or, you know, someone you're trying to recruit to your world. What is their value gaps? And value gaps change over time, and value gaps are different for different people. And so I think we get into trouble sometime, Dana, when we decide what someone's value gap is and we start selling them on filling that value gap, that we can fill that value gap. And that's not even what they're interested in at the time.
Yeah, one of the very first notes I wrote down that you have said before was, we can't decide what someone else's value is. Only they can decide.
Only they can decide. And our job really is to get really good in the conversation to self-discover what some of those value gaps are, and maybe even help them self-discover what some of the value gaps are. You know, one of the things that I love about using some of our tools that we have available to us, like the KPA, is because it truly puts you in a position where you really get to self-discover, and the person gets to self-discover who they are, what they want out of their careers. And it's just such a neat process, and it trains you to listen to who they are and what they really, really value.
So you and I had, well, gosh, there's so many things. I don't know why. I must have needed to hear all this today, because I've heard like 3 different ththings that have all tied together. Does that ever happen to you? It's crazy.
Yeah. When I hear it on the 3rd time, I know I got to act on it.
Yes. So, okay. So this morning, I watched a John Maxwell Facebook Live, and it was incredible. And he interviewed Simon Sinek. And he said, you got to go back and watch it. Oh my gosh. It was so good. But anyway, he said in there that a crisis will reveal, is the greatest revealer. It'll reveal the players from the pretenders. I shared that earlier. But then here's what he said. The difference in players are, players go to where the needs of the people are, and they figure out what their gap is, basically, and how they can bring value to him or to them. And then he said, what you said, we can't pre-decide. I had written that down before. John actually said assumption is the biggest leadership failure in almost every single leader's world, no matter if you're a real estate agent or you run a business or whatever it is, because we pre-decide and we assume too many things for people. And we can never really listen long enough to understand. One of the people asked Simon how he could become a better listener. And he said, listen, like you really have to just listen.
Well, and I think you have to care enough.
Yep.
You know, listening, you know, and I teach fierce conversations, so always revert back to that. But, you know, most people think listening is just waiting their turn to talk.
Yeah.
Right. Listening for the fact that you want to understand someone, which Oprah says is the number one need of anyone she's ever interviewed on her show, was not to be interpreted, but to be understood. And to understand someone, you have to genuinely listen.
Yep.
You have to be in curiosity and not just waiting for you to show your knowledge. And I think as a salesperson, I know early on in my career as a salesperson, I thought my value sometimes was in, you know, what I knew. Mm-hmm. And I learned it's so much more value as a leader is, what can I learn to ask?
Yeah.
And what can I help them to ask themselves so that they self-discover, and because until they have that awakening and that aha, nothing we can say or do is going to matter to anybody, right? You know, it's just like when a person gets to a certain place and they're ready, you know, they'll take action or they'll do something because they're ready, you know, and I can't make that be any faster. I always think about the time that when I was looking to join, you know, it was one of those things where I knew I needed to make a move in my real estate career because my business was getting massively big. And because I knew the structure that I was in, as much as I really liked the people and felt loyal to the company and the people, I kept running into obstacles every time I'd try to grow my business bigger. And I remember when I first looked to do something else, I always like to say, if you had just looked at my situation, you would have automatically assumed that the reason I would want to join Keller Williams over someone else at that time was because of the $80,000 I was going to save instantly.
Right.
It would have been a very sad misjudgment on whoever's part, because call it stupid or whatever you may, at that moment, that was not my greatest value gap. I kept trying to build a brand that was the biggest brand in my city, and the company kept thinking they were the brand. And so every time I would try, there'd be an obstacle in the way. So the truth is, that was a bigger value gap for me. And if you would have helped me self-discover that, making that move would have allowed, freed up all those barriers. I would have no longer had barriers of people trying to say, oh, you can't be the brand because we're the brand, not literally saying that, but, metaphorically saying that by all the actions and things that they didn't allow to make easy for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because someone would have automatically have looked at you and said, you just wanted to make more money, save the money to make more money.
Well, it's the same thing we do with sellers when we go on a listing appointment. We just automatically assume the most important thing to them is the money that they're going to have to pay you, and that's not always the case.
It might not be their motivation
at all. They may say, look, I'm more interested in time.
Yeah.
And I'm more interested in this or that, or convenience or whatever. And so we really have to, I think, in all parts of our life. I know in sales, becoming a better person that asks questions, more of a consultant, asking more questions, I was able to figure out from people what was of value to them, what was their value gap, and not just try to, assume and put into the words for them what I thought they should value, because it just won't work like that.
Well, Simon said something today that I wrote down that I thought was so good when I knew we were going to be talking about value. It just reminded me of this. He said, you don't listen well when you value what you want instead of valuing what they want. Mm-hmm. And then he said, listening is actually wanting to hear something. And a lot of times we forget that. And so it keeps us from figuring out what people's value gap is.
Yeah. And we have a guy coming on, and I don't know if I've mentioned this on the podcast or not, but I've been reading his books, and the books are all about prospecting. And so I'm really excited. He's agreed to be on the podcast. So you and I got to coordinate a time with him. But I love his approach because it's how I truly believe. He believes, and I'll probably botch this up, and he'll say it much better when he gets on, but he believes the same thing I believe. You can't make someone do anything. Mm-mm. What you can do is be the person that's there and make the match for what they're trying to accomplish and what you have. And then it's kind of magical, but he kind of makes you think in the way of, you're just that kind of spirit that's in the middle to help facilitate, and, just not be attached to, people saying no to you or whatever, because it has nothing to do with that. And I remember all the times I just was thinking it was rejection to me and blah, blah, blah. And when you come from a higher place, all that, I can see how all of that would go away. When you're at a higher place, I'm only every day challenged with, how can I go find the people who need what I have, or what I have access to, or what I can help them get. That's really all I'm here to do, ever. I can't do anything else. I can only be a vehicle in the middle for certain people, and I can't be attached to who does and who doesn't.
Well, when somebody thinks that you're just calling on them or whatever because you want to sell their house, I mean, that's not a good feeling for them, and it just doesn't ever work like that. I mean, you may get lucky and get some every now and then, but that's not what's going to build and sustain a long business. It's going to be figuring out really the motivation behind why they need to sell their house so that you can help them and then gain. We just revisited the promise script on my team, where you set the expectation up front about, I want to make this such a great service that throughout the process and by the end, you're going to have referred to me somebody who who's looking to buy or sell to, because I'm like, y'all got to get back. Everyone's got to get back to figuring out how we can help our people during these times, and how we can do a lot of these things, but build the relationships with them, be valid to them, then figure out what they need, and then spend time with them to really take the mind share for our clients. Because I think so many people a lot of agents are going to be hurting who are very transactional based, or who have built their business very transactionally.
You and I were on a call earlier, and it was very clear that the guy that was on there had great success, and he served first and last. That's where giving is always got to be the greater portion of what you do. It can never, the getting or taking or asking can never be the greater portion for anything.
Yeah. I know people are going to ask, Linda, so do you have, and I'm trying to look on my phone because I know you sent them to me, but maybe one of the books or the guest, the author that we're going to have on, just so we can share that?
Yes, I did have it.
We'll post it. It's okay.
Put it in the show notes, and we'll probably have him in the next week or so. He's ready to go, and you and I just have to find a time. His name is Sid.
Zone. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
His name is Sid Walker.
Yeah.
And his newest book, which has a little bit of the first one, I haven't read the newest one. I read the older one.
Living in the Zone was what you sent me.
Yeah, Living in the Zone is his newest one. So if I was going to grab one, I'd probably grab that. Because, a lot of times when an author writes more than one book, they'll pull some of the good parts from the other books.
Yeah, I found it. I found what you sent me. How I conquered call reluctance, fear of self-promotion to increase my prospecting. Right. Yeah, right. Yeah.
But anything that if your job is, and every business is a lead generation business first, and it's the biggest obstacle that most people have. But if you really put yourself in the mindset, I'm out to find out what people have value gaps that I can help fill, and that's my only role in this. I can't make anybody do anything. I can't, I'm not going to assume I know what their value gap is. I'm just going to get to know them. I'm going to ask questions, and I'm going to learn what their value gaps are. And if I truly can be a filler of those value gaps and help them, then I will. And if not, I need to be big enough to say I can't do it, or big enough to know that it's okay if they don't feel like I can do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Some of the things on value gap also is, I think really you have to be aware that people's value gaps also change. So if you've got people in your life that you're in a relationship with, one of the things that I love about doing what we call the career visioning process on people that are in your life in a major way on at least a yearly basis is because, like I always teach in Fierce, people change and they forget to tell you.
Yeah.
Well, some of their value gaps, what's important to them 12 months from now may have shifted. And so staying connected, especially if you've got a key role on your team, I get the call all the time from the top agents who just lost their major key player and they don't have any idea, how did that happen? I have no idea how I lost them. And, then all of a sudden their star player turns into this big, bad, wicked person because they've left. When the truth is, you got to turn that around and say, where did I get disconnected on what they were trying to accomplish in their life? And I only was focused on what they were accomplishing for me. Mm-hmm. Because part of someone's value gap, if they're in your life currently, if they're on your team, or even if they're one of your buyers or your sellers, you need to be checking on a regular basis and make sure, hey, now I want to make sure nothing's changed here.
Yeah.
The value gaps I'm trying to fill for you are X, Y, and Z. Are we still on track for that? Or if they tend to get off track and say, well, I don't want to take that first offer that came. Well, what about this that you said was of value to you is no longer of value to you? Oh, well, it still is. Okay, well, let's revisit that. So I think sometimes we might do it one time, but we're not realizing that this is something you need to do, especially if you've got key people on your team on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think, we see people leave teams all the time, and we see a lot of people wonder why they can't keep team members. And I just think that that's something really great for them to kind of noodle on. It happens.
So true. So just kind of revisiting the reason, the people that you want to be a hero to, the way you become a hero to someone is you go step into those gaps that someone has, right? And the main thing when I think about value gaps is you have to learn great questions. What are the great questions that are going to actually get me to understand someone's value gap? And you know what? There's just nothing wrong with saying, what's most important to you? What do you feel like is missing in your life? I believe with social media, with everything that's happened with COVID, I think people are going to be hungrier and hungrier for someone who's willing to step into whatever their value gaps are and help them.
Yeah. That was one of my last points I wrote down was ask great questions to find the value gap, because everyone has one. And I think it's important to talk to our listeners about not everyone is just born like being able to ask great questions. I mean, I know tons of people have really learned and mastered how to ask great questions. And there's a lot of books and a lot of things that you can, read and learn about more how to ask great questions. But I can remember even when I was an agent in the beginning, I just always thought that if I just word vomited all over everybody, that was, going to make them buy or sell their house or join our company or do whatever. But the reality is, whoever talks the most usually walks away feeling the best.
Yeah. And it is definitely a learned skill. I'm going to tell you, if I can do it, anybody can do it, because first of all, I've got ADD. So listening for me is hard. It's always been hard. But the truth is, what's interesting is, because now I enjoy watching people's lives change in such a major way, it's actually what I love to do now. So it went from, this is really painful.
Yeah.
To, I actually enjoy this because I love, like, there's nothing better. You interviewed Pam on your thing. And one of the things that she's talked about was me helping her accomplish something, a dream that she'd had her whole life. Well, to me, there is no greater reward. And so part of what happens is you have to learn this and do this enough that you see changed lives, because I don't think there's a realtor out there who doesn't love helping people, or you wouldn't be doing what you're doing.
Right.
And you certainly love changing lives. And the way you're going to do that is to really get good at asking great questions and being willing to listen.
Yeah.
And listening is a learned skill. Anybody can do it. And it's going to be painful in the beginning. And the other thing I would say, Dana, is when we talked about relationships and we talked about you being very careful about who you pick to be in relationship with, this is another place where if you've got the wrong people you're trying to do this with, this won't be fun. In other words, I love helping successful but overworked real estate agents, because I love the fact that I can go in and help them with leverage, exit strategies, next opportunities. Any of those things are going to be in my wheelhouse. But you give me a new person and they're so far back on what all they need to learn just to survive, I really, really struggle. So that's one thing to pay attention to, is as you work to get better at this, the more interesting the relationships you've picked are, the easier this is going to be.
Well, you shared a sentence, I think, on our very first episode of when we started talking about this magic formula. It was the one maybe even before relationships, when we just kind of started to talk about it. I'll look it up. But you said it was the one that Michael Hyatt and his daughter helped. And and honestly, I think that's good to share again, because when you get clear on who you want to help, you can figure out whose value gaps you can really fill. And I've used this a ton since then. So thank you for sharing it, because you said, I help blank understand blank so that they can blank. Right. And I think if there are listeners that are struggling with not knowing how they can fill some of those, how they can be a hero and step in to fill someone's value gaps, first you got to figure out who gives you energy that you're helping. Who do you want to help and what do you want to help them understand so that they can go what? Because just like you said, you like to help successful and overworked entrepreneurs, but really so that they can have, I think, a bigger
freedom and margin.
Yeah. Freedom and margin. Yeah.
What matters most to them. Yeah.
Yeah. And so really figuring out what each listener wants, like that exercise, I spent we were driving back and forth from Kentucky to Charleston, and Adam and I worked on that together in the car. I was texting you, but it was like a solid probably 2 hours that we were like brain dumping and saying words and then figuring out. But then when you have clarity on that, I was like, man, now I know really how I can go help someone fill their value gaps.
Right. And the more when you first start looking at this, it may be hard to fill in those blanks. And you may want to, talk out loud like I did in front of Michael Hyatt's daughter, who picked up on it quickly after just listening to me. And they'll listen to how your energy goes up. And then also, once you kind of put this in front of you, and by the way, the understand might be, I help them understand, do, or know. It could be any kind of word like that. It's an action word, And once you kind of put this in front of you, look at it. If you're trying to figure out, what do I do and what do I love doing so much I could get up every day and do it all day long and don't worry about how much money I'm getting or if it's time to eat or all the things I always say when you're really enjoying something and it gives me energy. Then you can start paying attention to when do those energy spikes happen? When do I get super excited I can't remember what I was doing the other day. And I thought, oh God, this is one of those moments. I could do this all day long. I love it. So that's what you have to do and tap into that. And then the more narrow you make that niche, as we said with Glenn, a Southern girl say niche and he says niche.
Glenn taught us the proper way to say it.
But the more you do that, then the more you're going to, your work's not going to feel like work.
Yeah, I wrote down your exact words were, what are the moments you feel on fire when you finish?
Yes, exactly.
And there's a big difference between those and those non-fire moments.
Any of the times in between are going to be the spots that you procrastinate on.
Right.
You know what I mean? So for example, I've even started paying attention to those because when I procrastinate, I normally am missing a who that they wouldn't procrastinate on that piece.
Yep.
So sometimes what people will do is the part that stops them or the part they procrastinate on, they'll just stay stuck there. And then they don't ever get to do the thing that they really, really enjoy and love. In other words, I could be on the phone all day long with top producing agents, helping them see opportunities that they've lived their life in such a way for, or that deep down they desire, and they don't, they'll have a regret if they finish their career and they haven't tried it or done it. Or I might see an opportunity where they're out of whack on leverage or creating wealth and freedoms and those kind of things. Man, I could do that all day long. It's okay. Where's the piece where I'm getting bottlenecked, where I am not doing that all day long? Well, it's getting the names, finding the people, getting the appointment, doing all that stuff. Yeah. So how do I go get that obstacle out of the way? What's a solution for that so that I can do more of these appointments where I do get to know people and find out what their value gap is?
Mm-hmm. That's a great example.
And then what I love about that, Dana, once you learn someone's value gap, you'll start to think of it's just like a muscle. The more you work it, the more natural it's going to become. And I'll find myself thinking of something or somebody. Mm-hmm. Oh, this would be a great book, or this would be a great piece of this class that would help that person. And then it's kind of just fun and it becomes a game because I'm constantly looking for a way to help them self-discover how to fill that value gap, right? Mm-hmm. And the other thing I would say about value gap is they're probably going to have more than one, because most people do. And so learning how to, if we just got one of those solved for you and we were back here a year from now, what would make you the happiest with your progress professionally if you got that one accomplished? Because they may wind up telling us 3 or 4, value gaps that they have, and we may get to work on the one that's not really the highest. And I also think I've learned from doing mineral rights in Fierce Conversations, you got to keep digging because a lot of times the first thing a person tells you isn't really the real thing. Mm-hmm. You have to stay with it a little while and dig a little while and get to the real, well, no, the real thing is this. Mm-hmm. This is the real issue.
Well, and sometimes too, even if they have multiple ones, I mean, people can feel overwhelmed when you try to start like, let's fix this one and this one and this one, like a little piece of this one and fix a little piece of this one instead of just attacking one at a time. I feel like then they can see a real change and a real difference.
Yeah. Or what's the one thing that if we got it taken care of, like Carrie says in the One Thing book, everything else would seem as important or matter.
Yep.
A lot of times there's one thing that's way more important. Mm-hmm. And everything else is maybe even a byproduct of not solving that one thing.
We could talk about that. I'm telling you, this formula, I mean, I've shared it with so many people, Linda, because honestly, now it's like, it applies to
everything.
I mean, anything and everything.
Yeah. I've been thinking about it a lot too, like with my like personal relationships, who are the people in my 3-foot rule, who are the people that I'm in relationship with, that at the end of my time, it's going to matter.
Yeah. What's the 3-foot rule?
3-foot rule is, at the end of your life, there'll be only a handful of people that'll be within about, or the people you let into about 3 foot. And then also I like to think, who are the people will be around me if it was the end, because I can't mess those relationships. I cannot afford, I can't afford to have regrets around that.
Yeah.
I don't want to be at the end of my life. And I think I've told this story before about my mom calling everybody together to apologize. I don't want to be that. I said, not me. I don't want to say, I'm sorry. I wish I had, and I don't know that you can ever maybe not have something that you regret, or I'm going to try not to.
Yeah.
just to be able to make sure you could do this with, how am I constantly being valid in my marriage? What am I doing to become a better mate? Because a lot of times what happens when we get in a relationship is we just kind of, okay, well, we're in it now. But how do I constantly figure out, how do I become a better spouse? How do I become a better wife for Jimmy? Because used to, I'd go to counselors when I was young, and they would always, I'd be there to talk about Jimmy because it was always his. It was always Jimmy. I mean, it was always something to do with him, I'm sure. And I'd be darned if they wouldn't route me back to me.
Totally.
Talk about me. I came here to talk about him. If he'd just stopped doing this, if he'd quit doing that. And it always came back to me. And it took me years to realize my marriage is going to be as good as I want it to be. And I'm willing to put the work in, and I'm willing to do my part and that was always so hard to get my arms around, because I thought, why are you talking about me? We're here to talk about him. And what I realized over time is, okay, I can only control what do I do? How do I get better? What are areas that I maybe not being respect for? I'm not, lifting him up, or I'm not, whatever, I'm competing, or I'm doing something, what I mean? And I think if you just focus on that, then, I can gripe all day long about customers or people I'm trying to recruit, or my family or my spouses. But the truth is, at the end of the day, that's all going to get better when I get better. Right.
Totally.
So if I work on my validity, I don't care what relationship is. If I need to work on it, I need to work on my validity, my peace. Where can I be more valid? Parent, sister, mother, spouse, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right. I think the formula works for everything. And I think once you kind of get used to it, you'll start to see it.
Yeah.
Then, it's like we always say with Fierce, once you know it, you can't pretend you don't, know.
And it's like on your RAS all the time. At least mine it is now, all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And then learning to say, man, I wonder if I could learn to get really good that when I have a real quick conversation with someone, I can start to spot some of the value gaps they have.
Yeah.
And you just keep working at it. And it's like any muscle. It's like the more you do it, the better you get at it. And then just being okay to say, what do you think? What's your greatest need? That's an okay question to ask. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to have the right questions. And the right questions are what's going to lead you to someone's value gap. Plus, I've learned that if you let someone talk long enough, so I always use the 80 to 90% rule, which my goal is to have them talk at least minimum 80%, preferably 90, 95%. Because I promise you, the more people talk, the more you'll get those clues of what someone's value gaps are. And if you're not sure, just ask. Yeah. I think what I hear you saying is one of the things you really need is you need help with X.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Well, everybody likes to talk about themselves. And so if you can just let them talk long enough, usually, they'll just come out and say it.
And when something's bothering you and you need help with it, don't you kind of even want to talk about it more?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like, man, who could I talk to about this? Because sometimes just the talking helps the person. Just talking out loud helps the person. And we're getting where our lives are getting so small that we have fewer and fewer people that we can do that with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been a big eye-opener for me, at least during the whole quarantine time.
Yeah. You mean the part about the life getting smaller? And
just like who you really talk to about things. And I think it's just that we've had so many trying times, it seems like lately. It's been like one thing after another. And I think as a leader, you don't ever want to talk to people who you lead about that stuff. So it really does it kind of gets a smaller of a circle.
You and I have talked about these being heavier times for you and I both, and we're not usually very heavy people. But I tell you what's helped, and it helps in any kind of situation, is if you can just go ask someone else how they're doing.
Yeah.
I do to help you, because then it just takes the focus off you and how you're feeling. So it's a great opportunity just to start practicing with people around you. See if I can just help figure out what a few value gaps are in the people I already know before you ever even have to go out and do it on a customer or a recruit or someone you're trying to recruit to your team, or before you ever even do that, just start with people around you. Start with your own kids, see if you can get it out of a kid, you can get it out of anybody.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point.
When I first started practicing to teach Fierce, I took one of the questions home for Press, who at the time was, I don't know how old Press was. I'll have to think about this. But, based on everything that's got going on, what's the single most important thing you and I should be talking about? And with a kid, you got to wait. You got to wait it out and let them be willing to sit with it for a while before they answer it. And you have to be okay with that silence and let that silence do the heavy lifting. But they're great people to practice on. Based on everything you got going on right now, what's the single most important thing you and I should be talking about? And let them answer.
Wasn't Precious something like really serious too?
So serious. He was about to go on a mission trip, and he said, I'm about to go on a mission trip, and I need to give my testimonial. Can I work on it with you? And I said, absolutely.
That's right.
And the second time I did it, it was during 0809. That'll tell us how old he was. In 0809, when the crash happened, and a lot of kids at his little private school he went to, parents were divorcing or committing suicide. It was bad. And, you don't know how much a kid actually is listening and paying attention. And he kind of got a little choked up and said, and I said, based on everything you got going on in your life, what's the single most important thing you and I talk about? Because we had actually set up these meetings to go meet, not have our cell phones and just visit with each other. So that was the presence of the meeting anyway. And he looked at me and said, are we going to be okay? And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I mean, like money. And I'm like, I would have never known that he's sitting over worrying because his friends are talking about my parents are divorcing, or my dad killed himself, or, serious stuff. So it's a muscle that can be worked. It's a fun kind of thing to see if you can help people figure out what their value gaps are and be the person that kind of steps into those, or point them in the right direction if you're not the person that can do it. But it's a great muscle to work, and it's a great strength to build, especially if you're going to be a leader, because that's part of our role as a leader, is to help people fill their value gaps.
Yep. I just had one last thing I wanted to share that I heard, and it kind of went with this today, and John Maxwell talked about service, and I think this goes so much with just providing value, but he said service is sacrificing your interest for the good of another human being's life. And as real estate agents, we're all in the service business. So, I mean, we are sacrificing our interest our own interest for the good of another human being's life. And really, that's what you're doing when you're finding somebody's value gap too. It's not about you, it's about them and stepping into it and filling it.
Mm-hmm. So true. So true. And I was trying to remember who was talking about this. It may have been John a while back, talking about, you're not really trying to be the hero, because a lot of times in real estate, we try to go in and be the hero person. Yeah. Instead of being the heart person and the person that fills a gap, and just the person that puts out fires all the time. That's different. Yeah. That's different than someone who actually steps into someone's value gap and helps them with it. Mm-hmm. Constantly the one running in with the big fire hose and putting all the fires out. That's different than building deep relationships and seeing if you can figure out what do people need and how do I step into that need or help them with that need.
Yep. Big difference between that.
Well, any final thoughts? I think we're about out of time here. I was thinking about the time. What I thought we would do next, because the last one we have is the time, over time. Relationships plus validity that you have to build to get in relationship with those relationships that you want to be a hero to. Figuring out what people's value gaps are and helping them self-discover that whatever you have to sell or you're doing can help them fill those value gaps. Yep. And then the rest of the formula is just giving it the time. So part of what I'd like to do next time is let's talk about some of the great accomplishments that we've had in our life, and realistically what that time commitment looked like. Because I think sometimes we've always heard, that we underestimate what we can do in a longer period of time and we overestimate what we can do in 24 hours, right? So I think talking through some of those, because some of the stuff, especially when we start talking about people creating a freedom lifestyle, it's going to take a time commitment. Mm-hmm. And I think we've been so much into instant gratification, most of our life, that we either underestimate the time and give up too soon, or we just don't commit to the long-term amount of time that something's going to take.
Yeah.
So we'll hit on that one next one. Any final thoughts or anything you'd want to add, Dana, about value gaps?
Man, I don't think so. I mean, I always take just as much notes too. So I just think this is so good. I would say if you haven't listened to the first two, go back and listen to relationships and to validity. because they do kind of go in the order, but there's just so much this is like priceless stuff to be learning. So
awesome. And then even think about your own value gaps. What have been some of your own value gaps over time that someone stepped into, and how'd that make you feel when someone stepped in to help with those value gaps? And then just starting to practice that muscle of asking great questions to see if you can kind of start figuring out and listening well enough to understand and maybe hear and if you've got a team, start with people on your team. You can always start with your family. That's always a good one to practice on, but just start learning to ask great questions and learn see if you can start pointing to what some people in your lives value gaps might really be.
Yep.
Awesome.
Love it.
Well, great. Hey, if you have a question or a topic or someone that you think would be a great guest on our podcast, or you yourself would like to come on the podcast, be sure and reach out to us at info@everything life and real estate. And remember, the more details you give us about your situation or challenge, the more we're going to be able to help you with that. And the greatest compliment you can give Dana and I is a great review on this podcast. And best of all, what we'd really love is if you think of someone that is in the real estate business or an entrepreneur that you feel like would really benefit from these conversations, be sure and pass this podcast along to them. We really would appreciate that. And Dana, I guess I'll talk to you next week.
Okay. Talk to you then.
Be sure to subscribe for more business strategies and tactics to inspire you to live an abundant real estate life. Don't forget to rate and review so we can bring you the best content. Find this and other valuable information at everythinglifeandrealestate.com.